press record. Okay. So today we signed up for something about inner conflict and inner parts. And we know very well that the Enneagram kind of makes us look at those parts of ourselves quite hard. And it's not particularly merciful on some of our parts. Those ego parts of ourselves, the Enneagram names them very clearly. And in the case of Naranjo, where these terms come from, there's not a lot of mercy on the parts of ourselves that do these kinds of things. So, the Enneagram ego strategy of the 9, going with the stream, or 4, seeking happiness through pain. Those are, they don't sound that great. And the Enneagram can make us very, very self-critical. And any of you have been on my courses or in previous sessions will know that one of my big missions in the Enneagram world and in our work and in my training of coaches is the work of unshaming. So a lot of people come to the Enneagram because they've got wounds that they're trying to heal, because they're dissatisfied with themselves. They feel a need to improve. They want to change. They find a lot of things wrong with themselves. And then they come into the Enneagram world, which promises some kind of hope of transformation. And they discover these parts of themselves in the ego strategy that they now want to go to war with. Like, okay, I've got to stop being like that. I've got to stop being a perfectionist. That's bad. No. So the ego then becomes our enemy and we want to kill it. And Tom Condon sometimes jokes, he was at a conference and he heard someone talking about how they were going to defeat their ego. And he said, do you know that your ego heard you saying that? So, for us to realize that the war against our ego and our ego strategy is actually the ego trying to kill the ego. And it's most certainly not going to work. It's something that comes from a place of self-shame, to be on the hamster wheel of self-improvement. And the hamster wheel of self-improvement usually involves us wanting to get rid of the parts of ourselves that we don't like. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, exploring those parts of ourselves that we try to get rid of. So the Enneagram names these kind of parts of ourselves in a lot of detail and specificity. And today we're just going to be looking at them from a different angle, looking at our inner conflicts and looking at the parts of ourselves that are in conflict and maybe bringing a new kind of awareness to that. So what I want to do first, I think, is give you a little exercise. So in referring to how the Enneagram names these parts, you know very well that it goes into a lot of detail at the type level and all the Enneagons. You know that it goes into the 27 subtypes and the 6 possible different instinctual sequences and all the fixations and vices and, anti-self actions and all the other things that our ego gets up to. And that's often how it's taught. You've got to catch your ego in the act and then interrupt it. And that's the conventional teaching in the Enneagram is often like that. So I want to look at it a little bit differently today. And some of you have worked with this with me in my teaching spaces or in other seminar spaces. But I want you to look at these parts, these different parts of the self that exist in all of us, and find one here that sounds like something to do with your particular Enneagram strategy, your reality strategy of your type. So I can tell you that part of 7 is most certainly a sarcastic, joking part. And that's, kind of, it plays a certain role. We're going to talk about the roles that these parts play. But find one that you think is part of your ego strategy, your type or your tri-type. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Just have a look at them. You might find 2, you might find 3 that you think, oh, that's me. No, that's me. Okay, so just write down the name of the part that you chose. And a little bit about it. Where does it show up most? And when? And when is it most active? When does this part take over the show? When is it most active? And then just looking a little bit more closely at what are its tactics? What does it actually do? So it's going to have a whole repertoire of behavior. And then explore for a moment when that part takes over. How does the world look? What is your experience of other people when that part's in charge? What's your experience in your body? What's the posture of that part? There might be feelings that you're aware of when that part is running the show. What feelings are in your chest area, in your heart? You don't need to give a feeling word. Just reflect on what moves through your heart area when that part is running the show. And then just take a second and think about, what does the Enneagram have to say about that part? To whatever level of depth you know the Enneagram, Like if you chose the critical part, then, you know, you might say Enneagram describes this Enneagram 1 as whatever. Now, just a few notes about what the Enneagram has told you about that part. Maybe you're aware of the avoidances or the heart wounds or the, you know, passions, whatever it is. Just a couple of notes about what you've learned about this part from the Enneagram. So on the one hand, I would like to put you into breakout rooms to talk about this. On the other hand, I think there's so much value in the open sharing. So there's an example of inner conflict. But I think I'm going to go with the open space for now because of how much we all learn from hearing each other and, you know, how things flow in the open space. So if anyone's prepared to share which part they chose, some of the details about it, like when does it show up and what does it do, what are its tactics, and some insights that the Enneagram has given you about that part. So who would like to jump in? Melissa, hello, I haven't seen you for a long time.
I know, I haven't seen you for a long time. So actually this part of me brought me here today.
Yeah. Well done, part.
So there are some good things, of course, about these parts. Yeah, good to see you.
Wait, Melissa, I want to ask you something. Before you tell us the type, first tell us all about the part and then only the type at the end.
Okay, say it again. Tell us
about the part and all the things about it, but don't tell us the Enneagram type until you get to what the Enneagram has told you. I don't want us to be hearing you through the filter of the Enneagram. What I want us to be doing is hearing you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, first of all, I had a hard time deciding which of the many parts that that are represented here that I wanted to focus on. But I decided, and so workaholic busy part, and then I said, oh, but it's actually the overactive, impulsive busy part. And I also have a critical judging part, and I have so many of these parts, as we all do. So I decided to focus in on the overactive, impulsive, busy part. So the impulsive, overactive part had me come here today. Because I'm supposed to be doing other things, of course. And it's Saturday though. So I'm like, why can't I do something for me and see these people again? That's been so long. This part of me starts, but doesn't always finish. Maybe get 75% done, but then something else grabs my attention and I switch gears because in the moment, I think I'm moving towards something that's more maybe important or maybe just pulling, you know, you asked about the heart. Sometimes I think actually the heart is coming through and saying, wait a minute, go over there because you really are hungry for this, you know, this other thing. And so I'll switch gears quite a lot impulsively in the moment because I have a part of my brain that knew this call was this morning and was like, well, maybe I can fit it in before this 11:30 thing. But it's also the part of me that avoids the hard stuff that I don't like the decluttering of my office and getting my taxes done that, you know, I've delayed up until now. Yeah, so to others, I look somewhat scattered, maybe uncommitted and not dependable. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about, I'm kind of joining some dots about So the office and the taxes might be the time when this part takes on that role more to avoid the hard stuff? Or are there other times when this impulsive, overactive, impulsive, busy part is really in charge?
I mean, there are days when it's fully, like when I wake up in the morning, and I think it's a bit of selfishness. I wake up very early, 5:30, oftentimes, like I did today. And so I think of that as my free time. And that's when I get to be impulsive and follow my heart and catch up on some of the things that I love. Certain newsletters that I read every day, or starting, sort of the daily planning kind of things. So it's not necessarily bad because I'm in that part of the day, but sometimes it takes over my entire day. Like I have a hard time finding unless I have like a thing scheduled on my calendar where there's another human involved. Quite often my whole day will go impulsively from thing to thing to thing. And oftentimes I get a ton done actually on those days, but it feels a little out of control, like I'm swinging from tree to tree. And there will inevitably be some things that I should have gotten done or that needed to get done that didn't fit into that day of relative flow, in a sense. So that's my self-compassion.
Thank you. Wow, I love that, tree to tree and impulsively from thing to thing. So it sounds like you come to the end of the day and a whole lot of stuff's done, but then you notice some important stuff didn't get done because you were swinging impulsively. Yeah. So tell us about the Enneagram insights that have come to you about this part.
Well, I mean, I am Enneagram 7. And so avoiding pain, avoiding boring, tedious tasks is certainly part of my makeup. Sort of this love of exploring, for me, that means learning and trying new things and meeting new people or having new conversations. That's all Enneagram 7 stuff. Also kind of like a big thinker, connect the dot Enneagram 7. So there's always puzzle pieces that are missing, that might be in that title of that email that I just need to open, because that sounds like something that really resonates, that is part of this other bigger picture that I'm putting together right now. And so, wow, that could be an important piece. I better go open that email because there's a nugget over there for me. Because I'm also tri-type, 7 for either 8 or 1. I honestly am not 100% sure, but there's this this pattern finder in me that's really strong, and also this big, like, for the sake of the world part of me. I really need to do this work. Don't fence me in, of course.
That again?
Don't fence me into a too predictable of a schedule, at least not every day, because that'll really limit my creativity and my ability to be my best and my worst.
So that insight was really, really powerful for me. Of you can't leave that email because it might have a nugget that connects to the other thing that you're doing, that is the big thing that you're creating. And it seems like that has some connection and value that you need to get. And that can carry on the whole day, from email to article to all the things that you're busy with, probably a pile of books and material.
If you looked around, you would see my medicine cards here and my 2 journals here, and and a pile of bills that I need to finally pay that are overdue here. And they're not big bills. It's just because it's a boring thing to do. And my phone and my coffee and my notes and the card I pulled today, and all that, which, by the way, was Anne, which is all about being patient.
Yeah.
which is
So
not nice.
there's a really, really interesting thing for everyone to absorb about the inside of a 7 experience of that, that gets shut out of awareness, the painful, boring, and hard stuff. And the focus of awareness and attention is on the shiny things, the nuggets, the beauty, the excitement, the things that, are part of the dot joining of the big project of life, it sounds like if I'm creating something beautiful and that feels important and meaningful and coherent and makes sense, then I need every single thing to do with that.
And everything else goes away.
Everything else does not exist. And I have a little bit of a revelation for you, and I should actually pause the recording, but look at my floor.
My fellow love 7.
So those are piles of notes from workshops and coaching sessions, and they're kind of organized, like there's private coaching, relationships, corporate, course notes. Notes from this will be there, but they pile up. And yeah, that is very 7. And then there are all these newsletters that you subscribe to, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And YouTube channels that you subscribe to.
Mm-hmm. And
courses that you've bought that you haven't completed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. So this is very, very key for coaches.
But Ingrid, that I see the pattern in all those courses. So it's like the pattern that matters, not the actual course.
Yeah.
I see some other 7s maybe smiling in the background here.
Yeah. So it's this thing of gathering and gathering and gathering. And I mean, in the Buddhist terms, they talk about that as, grasping and attachment. That, and the Enneagram is telling us that that's a particular ego strategy. It talks about FOMO and gives it some terms and things. I'm just wondering any other insights that you've got from the Enneagram about this particular reality strategy, because it comes with the whole focus of attention. It comes with behavior.
Yeah. Well, this is maybe, so here's something that's helped me a lot in the last year or two. And it's actually the process Enneagram, the idea that we go around the wheel over and over again, and where we get most stuck is actually our core type. And so as a 7, then I need to look at what part of 8 am I not willing to become right now?
That's Eagleson,
huh?
Lyle Eagleson.
Yes, Erickson, right? Eric Lyleson.
That's Eric it. I actually mixed up his name to someone that went to high school with me. Yeah.
Eric Lyleson. Yeah. And so his book, Journey Towards Essential Wholeness, I found to be incredibly, and the hero's journey aspects of that, incredibly important and useful. And so, yeah, then it's really becoming focused on the manifestation. And what am I not manifesting? What am I not, that I really want to manifest? And for the sake of that, I can focus.
Okay. So there, I think we've got 2 parts that we're hearing from. There's the overactive, impulsive, busy part, and then there's this manifesting part. And I don't know how you would, if you were to describe the manifesting part to us, which isn't on that slide, how would you describe that part that wants to manifest something? I'm just going to find that book.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if, so the manifesting part, well, it's this desire to manifest and create that I know is part of most of us. Mm-hmm. And I believe we have all 9 parts, absolutely. So it's, hey, all of this frenzied, it's a very logical, practical part that says, for the sake of, you can do all these things over here and have these piles and connect all these dots. And you'll never be done connecting dots because there will always be more dots. But if you don't manifest it into the world, then you're not bringing the value you actually most want to bring.
Okay. So this manifesting part is the awareness of, sounds like your generativity, your genuine potential impact in the world, what you could be making real, and an awareness that this dot joining activity is not actually manifesting anything without some other
Part
guardrail or other parts.
Yeah, without other parts, without connecting to that other part of me and allowing that other part to be in the driver's seat for a good part of the day.
So the part that is in the driver's seat for a good part of the day to get things done, what does that part look like?
Oh, that part actually has for me as a 7, what works best is that I have made formal commitments and there's a date by which I have to deliver something. And that I have the pieces the tasks that need to be done prior to that date, either in my head or in my calendar. But when I finally commit that this will be done by a certain date, and preferably there's an audience expecting it, that I have to deliver something in person or via Zoom, then the other parts of me, the manifestor, can get to work. And then I become sometimes the workaholic busy part, because I've spent all this time doing the fun stuff. And now I'm on the weekends and late at night and early in the morning doing the email, newsletter thing and the landing page, or, all the crap that I need to do to actually manifest the thing that I promised.
Yes. So it sounds like this part that you want to be more in the driver's seat, that was the metaphor you used. Formal commitments, dates, more logical. I hear a sense of things being more sequential, a better sense of time and dates, and
more structure, process.
Process.
So more of one actually as well. So more 8-1 combination. I need to reach and a bit. Yeah, I think I do a lot of 5 already.
Yeah.
But yeah, more of that 1-8 stretch to 1, and also that 8 wing kind of. I see it more as twister, right? And then, yeah.
So how does it feel for you then, when that one is in the driver's seat and things are structured and it sounds like there's an engagement and there's progress towards a particular goal that involves other people?
It feels pretty awesome. But I mean, the delivery piece is absolutely the most awesome. When I I'm running that session, or I'm on that call that I prepared for, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the inner experience when that driver's there and you're delivering and you feel that awesome feeling? What is the quality of what's happening in your mind?
Fully present, just fully present in the moment, connected to whoever I'm with. Timeless, it's like in a different kind of flow, service.
Yeah, the word that came just before you said it was flow. It sounds like the flow state. That sense of I'm here, present, fully with the person you're with. And that word service, where do you feel the associations of the word service?
Well, it's a heart thing. Entirely.
What does that feel like if you were to describe the sensations of feeling this feeling of presence, engaged, and in service. What's actually happening here?
Well, what's happening is I'm getting emotional, but in that moment, I don't feel emotional. It's because when I look back on it, I know that's where I'm in my truest me.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I feel you, that's the awareness of heart and this beauty and self-reconnection moment there, I feel. Yeah, the recognition of the
It's
true.
what you want for everybody, though. It's what I want for everybody, to have those moments of knowing you're in your true and right work.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like the things that come to mind for me there, just as you're talking. There's, the holy work, the holy plan, the holy wisdom. The best place for me to be is right here with you, with my heart, with your heart, my mind, with the presence, with each other. And it sounds like you're experiencing that depth of presence and flow when you're driving. Yeah. So that's really helpful, I think, for us all to just understand that the inner life, like the sense of impulsive, got to try this, these dots join, this belongs, I've got to include this, like putting things together, making sense of things. And that seems to happen much more in the head. It's very distractible, and the monkey swinging, and then coming to that place of just, it sounds like, Jessica and Russ Hudson speak about experiential depth. It's like dropping into presence in yourself. And then there's the flow and engagement. And you're here with me. We're doing something meaningful together. And you're actually manifesting and creating for real. And to see the contrast between those two, and the more we get to know the Enneagram, the more we often get impatient with that part that takes us out of presence. And we criticize it, and sometimes we try and attack the parts of us that are taking us out of presence. I was working with someone earlier today, and she was talking about these moments where I get it. It makes sense. I'm me, and I'm here, and I'm doing me. And I'm not worrying about who I am or why I'm here or what the fuck. I'm here and I'm in being. And what you're saying kind of makes me feel a similar feeling. While she was talking about that, it was like, here. And then talking about this other part of her that makes her disoriented and distracted, she was much more at war with that part than the way you describe yours. It sounds like you've come to a place where you're less shaming of that part.
Well, yeah. I mean, that part of me plays a very important role. I think the challenge is for other people to try, to work with me when I'm in that place. And I do work on a team with my daughter and my niece. And so I need to create structures so that we can work well together and they feel safe.
Yes.
And they feel like they can count on me.
Yes.
And then I have to have those times where I can just explore and connect dots, because I'm sure, Ingrid, your brilliance as a 7 comes from as well, is that we are consuming quite a lot that we're making sense in a world that doesn't make sense, and then trying to offer that back.
Yes, that's a lovely way of putting it. And I know Faisal Muqaddam speaks about it as the kind of mosaic mind, that there's this vast dome of infinite magnificence, and wanting to see the whole thing and see it does all connect. And wanting to, as you say, it's like wanting to share that the beauty of the cosmos and existence itself. There's that real thing going on in it. But what I'm hearing you also speak about now is the relational cost of the overactive, impulsive, busy part. And that wasn't one of the questions I asked is, how does it affect your relationships with people when that part is in charge? And you telling us now that when that part's in charge, maybe people don't feel safe. They don't experience structure. They don't know if you're reliable. They don't know if you're going to deliver because they see the monkey.
Yeah. And also they get overwhelmed because I want to share before it's in a state to be shared.
Yes.
That others can digest.
Yes, I get you. Yes. So you've found something amazing. It links. You say, hey, wow, look at this. It's so amazing. And it's not refined enough or packaged or structured enough that people can actually take it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that
and I used to be really angry about that, like in a way, like, why don't they see what I see? It's so obvious. I would get angry and frustrated that people couldn't see the world the way I saw it. And the Enneagram, as well as other vertical development models, have really helped me have compassion for that, and much more self-awareness, systems awareness, so that I can be really okay with it getting there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still feel like, why can't they see?
But and that thing of the Enneagram makes it, I think, brings that to awareness quite quickly, is that you're losing people, you're joining dots across paradigms, and other people aren't doing that. It's not what they're good at. They're good at other things. Maybe they're good at presence and empathy, and expecting people to follow that dot connection activity is sometimes, you leave people behind in terms of the world of ideas. So what I'm hearing here is an awareness of that relational cost, the impact on other people, of them maybe feeling unsafe and lost, and then the added cost of feeling frustrated and angry that they didn't get it. So there's like a misattunement that happens. That, like, it sounds like the overactive, impulsive, busy part is not attuned to the people you care about most, and it can't really be in service because it's kind of doing something else.
Yeah, if where I need to be is in a relationship in that moment, for sure, or in a or completing a commitment I've made. There can be a cost, for sure.
Yeah. So, wow, thank you so much. That's so helpful. And I'm sure it's helpful for all of you if you're going to have a 7 client, or if you are a 7, or if you've got 7-ishness in a team, to appreciate this kind of conflict within, between this overactive, impulsive, gathering, dot joining. And I think of it as quite hypomanic in myself. It's got a very intense amount of energy. It's kind of tireless, and it can stay up till 2 a.m. and listen to 15 YouTube lectures in one day, but yes, it doesn't know how to be in presence and with people. That's where we have to be. So how do we land that monkey and have a relationship with it in such a way as we can come into presence? So as a coach, how do you invite the monkey out of the tree? How do you make a safe space for this other person to be there, to evoke the presence of the other? Like Melissa, if we were to get together in a meeting, we'd probably spend 15 minutes like freaking out about all the books we'd read in the last little while. And have you heard of this? Have you heard of that? You introduced me to this book.
Yes.
So,
There it is.
There it is. And yeah, obviously within 10 minutes of you talking about it, I bought it. So, so how do you invite a 7 out of their head and grasping and monkeyness into presence in the room with you in a way that feels safe? So these are, working with parts helps with that, because, I think even just in our conversation now, thinking about the other part of you and what it wants, the manifesto, and how does it feel to be here, even talking about that kind of elicits some kind of state change. I don't know if you experience that. Like, how do you feel right now, in conversation with me?
I feel very grounded right now. I'm a little worried that other people are bored, but that it's self-serving, and I hope not, because I hope that you all know some 7s, and this gives you insight into our hearts and our minds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you. Anything?
Thank you.
You wanted to say something?
No, I just know a few other 7s and just curious.
Yeah.
And you asked, how do we invite the 7 into a more grounded conversation? And I think part of it is doing some grounding work at the beginning of the call, if you can. If it's for me, I actually like to stand and get into the lower part of my body and do some deep breathing and shoulder rolls, and like actually feel my lower body. And invite other people to do it with me, because it really helps me to be back in my body, and then to be, when I'm in my body, then to be over there with the person. And for me to prepare to be with another person where I know that there's I think about what part of me do I need to be bringing. I do a lot of intention setting before I work with people.
Yeah. So those are really like practices I've also learned, and that I know Uranio spoke about at one workshop I was at, where he speaks about as 7s mature in their kind of development journey, they become more aware of the lower half of their body, and they experience more solidity and weight in the lower half of their body. And I was absolutely astonished that somebody knew that, because that had been happening to me because of Tai Chi. And I'd really noticed it, like, wow, legs. So, yeah, thank you. That's a very good insight, that you can.
Yeah, and just also for 7s, I would say that walking and yoga or Tai Chi really do help, and like every day, if possible, because at least for me, that gives me that forward manifesting motion when I'm walking. Sometimes I walk and talk with a partner, and all kinds of things get born that really are helpful.
Yeah. So that's really, really lovely and beautiful coaching insights for us, and empathy for the 7s in our lives. And I also just link it so much to the trauma work around. Most of our work is about safety in the body in the present moment. And most healing is about that. And certainly the traumatology speaks about that all the time, is how do you create a space for clients in which they can be safe in the body in the present moment. And all of our defensive structures of the ego, as Russ Hudson says, are ways of resisting reality. So all of these ego resistances and these patterns and these strategies, when we feel safe in the body in the present moment, our personality can relax. So that sense of I'm here, I'm in my body, I've got these legs, and I've got this substantiality about me and my life. I'm grounded. I'm doing things. I'm making things. I'm connecting and seeing that delivery, seeing things take shape for real, as opposed to, my ego experience of 7 is being in the fantasy and the ideas and dissociated really out of the body into a very abstract realm. So from a trauma perspective, what we then start exploring is what made it necessary to exit the present moment. And for each type, that's this kind of similar question, is how did you find ways of avoiding that pain, that disconnection, that misattunement, that brutality, that cruelty, that conflict? For each of the types, the ego strategy has resistances and avoidances as a defensive deployment in the world. So when we start working with inner conflict and inner parts, like we've just been having this conversation, to understand that overactive, impulsive, busy parts and where you'd rather like to be driving from, sounds like a more calm and centered place with gravity, presence. Then we need to start asking, okay, so what role is that overactive, impulsive, busy part playing? And when you get into the deepest of this kind of work, we start exploring, where did that part kick into gear? Where does it come from? When did it first get on the scene and decide, you soft, present, gentle, warm, hearted, loving part, you just stay there, I'm handling this. And that's really what this inner parts work is about, is understanding the role that these parts play when they jumped in. So I'm going to show you some slides and show you a little video clip by Richard Schwartz, who's the founder of Internal Family Systems, and see how we can start thinking about these things in a trauma-informed way. Ultimately, for me, the goal of the session is that we all walk away never ever shaming our client's ego strategy again in our life. So appreciating the cost of the ego strategy and not being in the present moment with our heart, with our full awareness and our presence, but not shaming the part that takes us out of that takes us out of connection, that takes us into some kind of resistance. I think, Jim, you might have had your hand up a minute ago. Was it just that you put something in a comment? I think I saw a hand. Did I?
Yeah, just oh well.
What happened?
I just knocked my camera off the top of, but you don't need to see me. So what I was thinking of when you were talking about counseling or coaching a 7 is that the notion of co-regulation, that if I am present and I am grounded and I'm not fueling them, then they have a better chance of staying present as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's really lovely. And the kind of presence that a 5 can provide is very quiet and stable and emotionally unthreatening to 7s. One of the things that is a bit of a caveat in offering presence and connection to something like a 7 strategy is that it can feel scary, because 7s don't really want to be in the present moment. And, you know, when feelings open and when the heart opens, there's also pain. So, and there's the pain of knowing that one was disconnected as well. So sometimes you can find that if you are very, very warm and gentle and kind and connective with the 7, they actually get a shock, and they kind of they try and get away from it, or they feel very threatened. So I know that I've done that to some 7s in my coaching, where they screech into the room from another meeting and they're all hyped and they're like, I love my work, and then like after maybe 10 minutes or so of hearing them, and I say, so how are you feeling now? You know, seems like your breath is quite shallow here. That's the sense I get. What happens when you maybe breathe a little bit deeper? And then the person literally, you can see the shock on their face of that moment of recognition oh my God, I haven't been here the whole day. I've been in that spin. I haven't been with myself. I've left myself behind somewhere. And then in that moment, I've seen a panic sometimes with sevens, that inviting them into their body in the present moment can feel very overwhelming and threatening. So holding safety for seven, it's actually quite an art to not be too feely and not be too connecty. So Bessel van der Kolk and these traumatology experts speak about it, like pacing the client, not pulling them too far, too fast, because our ego strategy is a defensive system, not to mess with it too much, you know. So I love the idea, Jim, and I know from spending time with you how easing it is, you know, to be around you. Like I literally 30 seconds into us getting together, my whole nervous system just drops. It's like, whew, there's a relief. And then, you know, with someone like Leela Okabai, she's a facilitator of somatic embodiment work, this 9, deeply, deeply grounded. She facilitates an embodiment process at the beginning of the sessions. She co-facilitates with me. And I've been thinking about mindfulness the whole day. And I've been so busy with ideas of presence and almas. And I think I've actually been there all day. Then Leela does her process. And it's this overwhelming shock of realizing this is what it feels like to be present, not thinking about mindfulness. So like just a bit of that sense of like bringing someone into the present moment, how you're going to do it in a way that doesn't feel so unfamiliar that they actually start backtracking.
Yeah, can I add something, Ingrid? Having been coached many times over the last 20 years, the coaches that I really appreciate the most are the ones that can be with me and appreciate the brilliance of the frenzied dot connecting, that really love that part of me, instead of trying to bring me away from what I love, actually.
Yes.
Because that feels like, you know, when I have, you know, a coach that's wanting me to be other than me in that moment, it feels, I won't be a client very long, because then I'm not allowed to be me. I'm not okay as me.
Exactly.
So I need, join me, like be excited with me, be like wildly curious with me, so that I can express, like you did brilliantly today, Ingrid, right? And then just keep asking questions that peel back so that I can notice my own transitions. That's very helpful.
That's really beautiful. And I hear in that also, like, it's non-shaming. They're not trying to change you. So I hope that I wasn't giving that impression and saying, invite the 7 down, invite the monkey down. You're not trying to change the person. You're not shaming the overactive, impulsive, busy part, but you are helping the client to notice where they feel better. Like you prefer when the driver is the present, grounded, heartful, connected, without shaming the gifts of the vast, expansive, idea loving, enthusiastic, etc.
Actually, I like all the parts. Like I appreciate all the different parts, but balance. It's more like, how do I find and not overuse certain parts? If that's helpful to some people, maybe. I can't live, you know, it wouldn't be good for me or anybody else to live in that erratic, impulsive place all the time. But boy, if I don't have a little bit of that every day, I'm not alive.
So that's very powerful insight, I think, as well, is what we're looking for is parts to whole integration, that there's an inner wholeness that knows that there are these parts that have their gifts and strengths and that want to be alive and that can play and be present. But not one of them hijacks that the I all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
Yeah, Essential Wholeness is Eric's book. Somebody had asked, but it also is kind of how he teaches and how I've come to think of the Enneagram as, the 9 parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so thank you for that. That's great. At our last session, we spoke a lot about the 9 strategy, and we had Teresa Daniels here. So it's really cool to have someone here speaking about 7 with, you've done a lot of work and you've able to bring a lot to the understanding. So
Thank you.
yeah, really this inner conflict and inner parts work when it comes to the Enneagram is starting to understand our ego strategy and what it really wants to do, and also how it's trying to protect us, because these inner parts often form in a traumatic moment. So that's where the traumatology comes in, is understanding that these inner parts that we have that are very ego-driven are often responses to early complex trauma situations where we can't escape. And I'm not just using that in a 7-ish way, I'm using that in a generic traumatology way, is that we are in a relational environment as children where there are no alternatives available to us. And we are experiencing misattunement or some form of neglect or some feeling of shame, unlovability. The core avoidances that the Enneagram describes and the heart wounds are the things that some of these parts jump in to save us from. So when you look at those protective parts that I showed in the other slide, you usually find that they are helping us deal with the Enneagram avoidances. And I've just elaborated on them a little bit, in the Chazo, there's one word here and there. So I've just elaborated on the avoidances from the kind of table of avoidances with a bit of my own coaching, understanding and experience of, the core holes that people are trying to avoid in themselves, the deficits that they internalized from their early holding environment. So those are the things, the feelings that our ego strategy is trying to help us to avoid feeling. And the Enneagram describes those feelings. If you read Sandra Matry, The Spiritual Dimension of the Enneagram, she speaks about those very core wounds that we have to touch into and find the healing there to alleviate the burden that's placed on this protective part. So these protective parts are working really, really, really hard to help us not to feel the core wounding and pain that the Enneagram describes. So that's something that we can learn. But the key part of it is not to shame the parts. And Melissa, I love the way that you speak about it. You love all the parts. And hopefully we get to that journey where, as an Enneagram 1, I can really appreciate and love the inner critic and the controlling part of myself, because I understand the role that it's been playing and how it's protected me and the hard work that it's been doing to look after me. So, in a parts work, in various modalities, I just made a list of some of the modalities that appreciate the significance of inner parts as relatively autonomous consciousnesses within us, that we start to form a dissociation between the conscious and the unconscious, if they are unconscious parts, and then we start to appreciate their role and enter into a new relationship with them. So if you take the metaphor of the driver's seat that Melissa used, has that protective part hijacked the bus and is driving it. And we have no agency then. Our agency is lost, because if we want to manifest something, we can't, because that part is driving. And when we understand its protective role, and we start being able to hold that wound ourselves consciously, whether it might be anxiety or fear or, you know, these kinds of feelings that are described in the trauma literature and in Maitri for, you know, say a head center type, or the shame for the heart center types. If we can hold that shame ourselves, if we can hold that feeling, say for 7, I'm speaking for myself now, of being utterly lost. Tom speaks about the metaphor of like a waif. I used to use the metaphor before I met the Enneagram of a stray dog, that I'm lost, I'm neglected, no one cares about me, my needs aren't going to be met, I'm deprived, I'm in pain. That's at some core of feeling of that lostness, that protector is going to jump in to find meaning, to create joy, to create beauty, to make the universe feel amazing. And the compensations that we come up with in our ego strategy are the perfect match for the pain. So really coming to understand that those protective parts have been working. They've really been working hard. And these modalities help us with that. They do that. They help us to see, that part has been doing something. It's got a voice. It's got something to say. And that appreciation is part of this work. So I'm going to play this Richard Schwartz little video clip. He's the founder of Internal Family Systems, an absolutely wonderful modality. You'll get a sense of it now. So I'm going to play that. Sorry. Something's not going. Let's try that again. Don't know why it's not doing it. It was working fine earlier. Let me just go out and back in.
Work I did about 30 years ago, actually. I was a family therapist doing traditional family therapy and was frustrated at my results and began asking clients why they weren't cooperating. And they started talking about these different parts of them that were in the way. And at the time I was working with bulimics in particular. And they would talk about a part that was when something would happen in their lives, become terribly critical of them. And then another part that would come up that would feel really lonely and bereft and empty and scared. And then to the rescue would come the binging part that would get them out of that place. But then the binge would bring back the critic who's now attacking them, in addition to all the other reasons for being a pig. And then that would bring back their kind of worthless, empty, lonely, scared place. And as they talked about that, it reminded me as a family therapist of ways people in family members would protect each other or would be polarized with each other and fight, but they had all these internal relationships. And so I began just applying some of my systems ideas from family therapy to this inner system. And I was lucky, I had a couple clients early on who were very articulate about this inner system, this inner life they had going on. And I was able to work with them in a collaborative way to try and experiment with ways to intervene and also to understand these inner systems they were bringing to light. And they talked about these parts as if they had a kind of autonomy and that there wasn't much they could do to stop them sometimes. And so I was worried initially that maybe these people were sicker than I thought. And then I noticed that I've got them too. And some of mine can do the same kind of thing with food and other things that were happening with them. And so then I calmed down about that. And again, initially I was taking from most of psychology the idea that these were internalizations of parents, or like the critic was a internalized voice of a mother, or the binge was an out of control impulse. And so I would get clients to fight with them or try to ignore them. And that just made them stronger, but I didn't know what else to do. And then I had a client early on who was cutting herself, and it was driving me crazy to have her do that on my watch. And so by then I learned about ways to actually have my client talk to these parts in an externalized way through an open chair kind of technique, where client would be in one chair having a conversation with a part of them in an open chair across from them. And then they could shift chairs and be the part talking back. And I'd heard about that from Gestalt therapy and was using that for lots of different parts. So I had a bunch of chairs in my office and clients would hop around. And with this cutting part, I was trying to get it to surrender and not keep doing this to her. And one session, just badgered it for a couple hours. I would talk to it about how it can't keep doing this, and she would. And finally, at the end of the session, it said it wouldn't. And of course, she opens the door. I open the door of the next session, and she's got a big gash down the side of her face. And I just collapsed at that point. I said, I give up. I can't beat you at this. This is a dangerous game. And the part said it didn't want to beat me. And that was a kind of historic shift in the development of this, because I went from being pushy and coercive and then collapsed to now I'm just curious. Why are you doing this to her? And the part proceeded to tell me how when she was being hurt, she was a sex abuse survivor. As a child, it needed to get her out of her body, and it needed to contain the rage that would get her more abuse. And I shifted at that point. Now I'm not just curious, but I have a kind of appreciation for the heroic role it played in her life. And I can extend that to the part and have her do that too. And it burst into tears, like no one had ever appreciated it before. Everyone was trying to hate it and get rid of it. And that, from that point on, I've never fought or had clients fight with parts. Instead, we just go to them to learn their secret histories of how they've been forced to do these very extreme things inside of clients. And many of them are still doing it because they're frozen in time. They're kind of stuck in these scenes in the past. And they think the client is as young and as vulnerable as they were at that time. So, so the basic idea is that everybody's got them. It's not a sign of pathology. It just simply is the way we are structured as human beings, to have a bunch of little minds working together, ideally, to try and help us survive or thrive. And that they're all valuable. They all have valuable qualities to bring to our lives and help us in various ways. But because of what happened to us in the past, they are forced out of their naturally valuable states into extreme roles that can be dangerous and also can cause disease, I'm finding, relative to your audience. So
tell me more about that. What do you mean?
So there you get a sense of a genuine unshaming that we could bring to the Enneagram. I mean, when I made this post, I used all the Naranjo terminology, and, you know, I don't like my clients to see this because it is very shaming. You know, it's very critical. And, you know, even the conventional type descriptions that we use, they name the destructive elements of the protective parts. They name the way in which the protectors don't serve us and how they damage relationships, like Enneagram 8, you know, that ego strategy. The Enneagram names a lot of how that doesn't work. It doesn't explore what role is that part really playing, and how do we unburden it from needing to play that role? How is it frozen in time? So the only teachings, like more Sandra Maitri-ish teachings, that go into the underlying emotional need for that type. So yeah, just really wanting to bring that kind of different perspective and appreciating that these parts form due to some form of complex trauma, that, you know, you would need something to happen to develop a very tough defensive strategy. you would need some environment to happen in order to necessitate an Enneagram 9 ego strategy deployment. You know, is I'm going to deploy the blanket defense of narcotization. This is a really good idea. I'm going to just kind of dissociate from my body, and I'm going to put up my fog and I'm going to put on my invisibility cloak, and I'm just going to stay below the radar because that's the best thing to do. And so that protective part that people call, you know, sloth or, you know, disengagement or narcotization, even those words, you know, are very unappreciative of the heroic duties that have been performed by that defensive system or part. So in hypnosis, we work very much with the part as an autonomous consciousness. So taking someone into trance and then saying, you know, this part that doesn't want to let Jim write his, whatever he's writing a book. So pretend you're writing a book. That part of Jim that is procrastinating him and not letting him write the book, can you please step forward? And then Jim under trance, the part would respond and say, I'm here. So, okay, can you tell us what your name is? And then you start being very curious about the role of that part. And you can do some of these exercises and questions from a conscious place. Like some of the questions I like to ask the parts are things like, what role are you playing in his life? What are you afraid would happen to him if you weren't playing this role? So if I were doing a session, say with Melissa, I would say, okay, this busy, impulsive, overactive part, what are you afraid would happen if you weren't doing this job? You've been working really hard. Then I would ask, how old do you think she is? How old do you think Jim is? This part that's stopping him from publishing his book, you know. And those are the kinds of questions we ask the part, and the part must speak for itself. And then we start to see, oh, okay, this is what it's helping us with. This is what it's helping us not to feel. And for something like, say, you know, the fear of conflict of 9, it's actually about disconnection, you know, like when 9s can hold themselves in their body in the present moment and be here and feel engaged and feel alive in their whole body, feel like someone last night was speaking about the sense of a feeling of fizzing aliveness in the whole body as a 9, being fully here after a workout and walking outside and seeing the leaves on the trees and the red leaves on one side and the green on the other, and like describing the experience of being fully embodied. That's like when you don't need the fog, you don't need dissociation when you are here and safe. So, no, asking the part, how old do you think he is? And then in hypnosis, we would have a mediated conversation where, you know, you might ask the part, you know, what would it take for you to believe that, you know, Jim is an adult with the expertise and depth to, you know, publish a really wonderful book, and that has so much experience and wisdom built into it, and that he's not actually 5, and that there are people who would love to read that book. What would you say then? Whatever the conflicting part is, it might be a procrastinator or a self-doubt or critic or whatever. And then here, you know, well, I'm worried he's going to feel humiliated, or I'm worried he's going to feel rejected, or, you know, understanding the role that part's playing, and then working with those underlying feelings so that that part begins to see that there is an adult in charge, a genuine, proper adult with experience and wisdom and getting that part to see that. So, you know, you might say to the part, have you noticed all the things that, you know, Melissa has achieved in her life so far, and how much she has really delivered? And Jim, you know, have you noticed that, you know, that Jim has this presence that, you know, gets people to invite him to play certain roles? And when that unconscious inner part becomes aware of the reality that you're an adult, and it starts trusting you, it says what it needs to be able to begin to play less of a big job. So you can ask the part, what would you need to see to ease up a bit? You know, like if somebody asked my procrastinator, what would you need to see to let Ingrid do what she wants to do, and not to keep stopping her and distracting her and, you know, making her not do that thing that she really wants to do? What do you need to see? What is your kind of burden of proof for giving up some of this job of procrastinating? And the very interesting things start to come out. You really stop shaming that ego. You start appreciating the role that it's been playing. And you'll also notice in yourself that when that other part is in charge and not this I of presence, that there's a dysregulation in your experience. There's no coherence. So there's usually some kind of triggering. You're not present in the moment fully here. Like Melissa was describing, that feeling of presence, engagement, service, heart, being really, really with where you are and who you're with. There's a disconnection. There's an incoherence. So the feelings and images and thoughts are disconnected, and usually there's a connection to future or past or fantasy or worries or something like that. The worrying part doesn't have a coherence to it. But when we've appreciated the inner parts and we're able to hold the pain of these avoidances, when we know it's like, I'm okay, I'm home for you, my feeling of being lost. I'm home for you, my feeling of being alone. I'm home for you, my fear. When we take that role, then those parts begin to relax and we start to experience the higher qualities that the Enneagram describes. We start experiencing the virtue, the holy idea. We start experiencing our healthy instincts in the now, because our instincts are very much about where we are right now, and they're very attuned. So this is kind of what the Enneagram can help us to do, is to experience this coherence and presence. But the way there that I'm advocating for is through the unburdening of those parts, rather than going against them or shaming them or fighting them. It's really the path of appreciation and love, and bringing that part towards us and saying, thank you, I really understand what you've been doing, and you've been worried about me feeling so bereft and lost. I've got it. I've got that feeling. I'm looking after that feeling. Don't worry. I'm big now. I'm an adult. And then the whole balance changes. And that fracturing of our presence becomes a sense of wholeness and coherence in the three centers. And with the heart is here, awake, alive. The mind is here, awake, alive. And that full body is fizzing with energy and aliveness. So this is kind of what I'm trying to do, and how I'm trying to bring these insights into the work. And I think in closing, for the content side of things, before we have a checkout, these incremental changes and experiences of integration, where there is an inner wholeness that we can integrate the parts into, and a relationship between our inner wholeness and the parts that we can witness, that we start experiencing an easing of our being and a relaxing of the parts and a relaxing of the overall defensive strategy. So that's kind of where I'm trying to go with this work and with my teaching, my thing about bringing the traumatology insights and these modalities into the core of the Enneagram work is how do we relate to our type with more compassion and awareness of how it's trying to keep us from suffering. So that's the end of this content. I'm going to stop there. I want to just let you know, I think you probably saw in the announcements that this 5D trauma-informed Enneagram coaching training, it's an IEA certificate program. I'm running the next round of it starting in November. So if you're interested in joining up for that, you can just email me or whatever. We focus a lot on these kinds of things, the anti-self actions. So part of our ego strategy is this. We've got parts that do this to our core self, to that sense of our presence, our aliveness. A lot of the training on the 5D program is looking at some of these neglected Enneagrams and seeing how do we coach somebody to help them to stop self-forgetting. So it's how do we allow that self-forgetting part to relax? How do we allow the personality to relax so that and how do we strengthen the person's inner resources so much that that strategy starts to feel unnecessary? So it's working deeply from within the resourcing that those things start to just incrementally relax. And this is what I'm talking about here. These moments of, regulation, co-regulation that allow the resistances to dissolve. So that's what that's about. You can find out more on my website or whatever. So let me stop sharing, and we're heading for closing time. I always like to stay a bit longer, and anyone who wants to can, but those who need to leave, I'd love to just hear a little bit of a checkout from you. How are you? And maybe something landed for you. I don't know. Let's hear.
Do you want to hear the checkout in the chatting, or do you want people to unmute?
I'd like to hear, people, especially people who need to go quickly, soon, if you've got a hard stop, I'd love to hear from you before you leave. And the chat would be great as well if you've got comments. Anyone want to share what's landing? Is there anyone here who's new? I see some less familiar people. Anna, let me ask you, what's landing for you? Sorry, I'm just grabbing you because no one's stepping up.
And you mean me? I'm not sure. I'm the only Anna.
Yes, I named you. There's Anne. Okay. Yeah, Anna.
It was really interesting for me today. And I'm a 1. I'm a coach, and I love coaching Enneagram Type 7. And what you said about not shaming is so important. And when I coach, I want to stay out of the way of the client. And of course, as a 1, I have my credentials with the ICF and I keep them current and all of that. And for me, what I like a lot is clean language, because that's very, very easy for me to stay out of the way of the client. So clean language, the first question that you ask is, well, what do you like to have happen? And then you leave everything up to the client, and you repeat their words, and you speak language in a kind of dance. And I can give you one example, like you give the prompt, the way that my Enneagram type has served me best in my relationships. For me, that in my relationships was already too much. In a clean way, I would have asked, the way that my Enneagram type has served me best is like what? And then, yeah, you follow the words of the client. And for me, that's a very nice way to, what shall I say? Dance with the client. They lead, and I'm just a follower. And they sing their song. And it's important for me to love my client and to be attached with them. And then clean language has been really helpful. And as I coach many sevens, I like them a lot. And we gel very well. And that's because of my type. So I'm also aware of my type when I coach. So if this happens like that, well, that's the way it is. Yeah. I'm happy with that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, and I think they're just the consciousness of the unshaming and trying to, get out of the way. I think that's lovely. Joy, are you there?
I'm here. So what I've found, I've been doing, I kind of like invented my own form of parts work at some point, and then I discovered IFS, and it really, really took off at that point. But it's been several years now, I want to say, and I've found that the Enneagram has been really useful. My daughter's peeking in at us here. The Enneagram has been really useful in determining, like seeing patterns in myself, because when we're blended with parts, we're usually pretty unconscious of them. We don't recognize what's happening. And even if we're not like blended in the moment, just the overall pattern tends to be pretty unconscious with a lot of them. So like hearing about SP4, like learning about that, for example, I was like, wow, okay, I definitely see how I do these things. And then it gives me an opportunity to ask inside, is there a part of me that's, trying to fix my like physical health and situation in order to like earn the like worthiness of love or that sort of, just as an idea of how that can work. And the combination of the Enneagram helping me see my own patterns and what's unconscious, and also, being able to explore it with parts work has just been really transformative. And I've had a lot of life-changing experiences, but none so much as discovering parts work. It's really been miraculous for me.
Yeah, I can definitely second that, and thank you so much. And I love that you brought in the term of blended. When we blend it with parts, we can't see them, they're unconscious, and there's a lot going on that we can't name and we can't do anything with. And when we differentiate, and we first start with the naming of the parts, and then we can enter into a relationship with them and then integrate them into the wholeness with love and connection and depth. But when we completely blended with them unconsciously, then there's no possibility of dialogue, and there's no possibility of unburdening that part and truly healing, because that part is doing the job of, holding the pain. So yeah, thanks for that. I love that. The terminology is beautiful. Huh? But parts work is just great.
I have a real quick little thing I can offer about how to get unblended when it seems really hard. What's really worked well for me when I'm, dysregulated and I'm aware that I'm blended, but I can't seem to get unblended, is to just go ahead and write myself, like, like self with a capital S, a letter, or not even a letter, a message from the position of being blended with that part, and just go ahead and unload, and like whatever my frustration or pain is, just like go ahead and write it out. And then at some point, all of a sudden there's a shift, and now I'm in self and I'm interacting with the part.
Wonderful. And I know there's a lot of evidence about writing as therapy, that, just writing is as effective as psychotherapy. So that's wonderful that you also, have found that so confirming. I know in my coaching, there was a whole letter writing process back and forth between different parts that was facilitated by my coach. And it was absolutely fascinating to see what the part I was trying to get rid of had to say. And it wrote like 2 pages in caps with 18 exclamation marks, because it was the first time that anyone had ever listened to it. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Beautiful.
Welcome.
Who else would like to check out with anything here? Fran, did you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'd like to. So 2 things. The one thing I want to explore more, and I think it's something that Melissa brought in relating to that book about wholeness, essential wholeness, was that idea to remind ourselves that we move around the Ennea types. We've obviously got our home type, but then that we move around the other ones. And the point you made about there's a place where you get stuck. And if I understood it correctly, it was like there is a type or some element of a type, which may not be your own type, that you are afraid to manifest or you're avoiding.
Yeah.
So I want to get more curious about that and understand, is that like, okay, so is there a challenge within a type, which may not be my core type, that I'm avoiding drawing on the higher side of it? Yeah. Or is it most likely to be the higher side of my own type that I am struggling with? So that's the one thing. And I just like to be reminded of, being able to draw on the other types and thinking of myself more holistically and integratively.
Absolutely. And that is so lovely, because it takes the Enneagram to a more fluid and dynamic space. And I think it reinforces this idea that of a deployed strategy that's dynamic, and that we've got various things. And when this doesn't work, we try that. And they're mutually reinforcing often. So that's why I like to talk with the full instinctual sequence and the tritype, because, and the wings. But what Melissa was referring to from this book is that we kind of moving forward towards the next type around the circle, and fear falling back into the one behind us. It's quite an interesting idea. But it's very technical. Okay. I don't want to go into that kind of now, because we're kind of checking out.
Okay. Well, then one last thing I just wanted to check out with was, I love that point about I think it was you that said there's an inner wholeness that can see and hold all of the parts of ourselves. And then something that came back to me, which I've been doing a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy, and it makes use of cognitive diffusion. And without getting too technical, it's just the mechanism of recognizing that it's all just your mind doing all of this stuff. And then something that helped me when I was overthinking while doing yoga was, I just said to myself, don't worry, your worries are all over there. They're in a notebook there. They're not going away. Don't worry, your worries are not going away. So it's like this lovely paradox that the parts of me, and the part that I picked was the worried part, that is worried. Maybe it's just worried that it's not being heard. And, it helps the worried part to know that the worries are not going to be, to know that they're all there. That they're not going to vanish or something.
And to not shame the worrying part, or to try and stop it. You can't tell your client stop worrying or worrying, it's like, the worried part is actually worried that it's not worrying enough often. In hypnosis, we'll do things like that as part of the induction. We'll say, any thoughts and concerns and any worries, you can just put them aside for now, and they'll come back to you later with much greater clarity. That nothing's going to be pushed away. We're just using this time in a special way. And I love that. It's like telling yourself, it's fine. My worries are still there. I can have them any time, and they actually, that worrying part, how is it really so helpful and amazing? And that wholeness, acceptance and commitment therapy, that RAIN process, recognize, accept, etc., is really about cultivating your awareness of that inner wholeness that can hold your pain. that can hold these massive tsunamis of feeling. Like Enneagram 4 equanimity, you're cultivating that presence that has the capacity not to be knocked sideways by feeling. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I can have the feeling, it's fine. I'm terrified,
Yeah.
I'm dying, my heart is stabbed, I'm bleeding to death. Oh, well, it's okay. Yeah. Thanks for
Thank
that,
you.
Fran.
Thank
Anyone
you
else
for
want to
this.
check out? I want to especially prioritize the people who need to leave very shortly. So please put up your hand if you need to go so that you can have a chance to check out. All of us are the, used to say in South Africa, the bitter einders. We won't leave. We won't stop. Yeah. Jill.
Hi. So I loved Richard Swartz's video. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ingrid. It's the first time I've seen it or heard of him. And I was quite humbled by his vulnerability in describing how he found parts and how open he was to share with us that initially when clients spoke about a more destructive part, that he kind of tried to get them to ignore it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like, I thought that's Enneagram. We try and ignore everything bad, like in ourselves. And, you know, that's what reaction formation is. We try and suppress it and make it go away and diminish it and pretend and reduce it and kind of deny it and ignore it. And clearly that never works, as you all know. So, and then his incredible kind of affirmation of a part that cuts someone, how he termed it heroic. I got so emotional when you spoke about it because I just thought, wow, that is like unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, the unshaming part of that comment of being able to say that that part plays a role for that person in some way and recognizing that, I think was like the best part of this afternoon. It was like, wow, unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
So just being able to hold in non-judgment any kind of thing your coachee brings you that in the regular world may seem terribly distasteful or even immoral or whatever the case is, being able to acknowledge that that thing is serving that person in some way, and being able to sit with that is so powerful.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that message.
Immensely powerful, and yeah, that moment is so touching. And literally in IFS and in this work, there are no bad parts. So, you know, I mean, that was a good example, something quite extreme, you know, that it's difficult for us to deal with the possibility that it's playing a protective role. I'm glad you gave such an extreme example because, you know, our clients show up in our rooms with lots of things they want to get rid of in themselves, lots of things they want to change about themselves. And usually in coaching, I've seen people jump on the bandwagon with the ego and say, okay, we're going to change that thing about you, rather than resourcing the person for that role not to be so needed anymore. So it's a totally different paradigm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your hand is up.
Yeah, so I became interested in IFS 6 months ago, and I've watched a bunch of his videos and taken an online course, and that process of welcoming even the parts that you know, by anybody's judgment are trying to get the person to do, you know, really destructive things, but I've seen these things in such a way that it over a pretty short amount of time they can unburden and they can find a new role, and it's just very, very powerful and very unshaming.
Very much so. That's why I love it so much, because then you're not colluding with the client's self-shaming. You're creating genuinely new possibilities for them to be in themselves in a different way. and getting off that treadmill of, you know, self-development in a totally new way. Things unfold in a different way. And I love what you mentioned there, which I didn't mention at all and didn't come out in the session, is that that part can then find a new role. So if I'm deeply centered and I'm holding the pain, then that part can do its job differently or play a different role. Like for me, that kind of hypomanic learning part, you know, if I hold the existential anxiety at the core of the 7, then that part of me can still do learning and learning design and find interesting things and integrate them into course materials. But I'm being with myself. And that part is just doing the job of synthesizing information. It's not doing the job of making me cope with existential panic, you know, which, you know, it's not a good distribution of labor to have that part overworking like that. Sorry. But yeah, I like that you brought up that point. And in hypnosis, we do that as well. When we talk to a part, we say, okay, when you see this change, when you see Ingrid start doing these things, when you see Jim start doing these things that are going to make you feel relaxed, that there's an adult in the room, what role that can you then start to play? What is your true role? You know, like that vicious shaming inner critic can become a trusted advisor, a specialist consultant, or, you know, that part is unburdened from overworking and playing an extreme role, because now it sees, oh, okay, cool, she's got this. I'm just gonna go and, you know, I'll read this book and I'll make notes and I'll integrate them into the materials, but I'm not going to keep her awake until 2:30 a.m. Yeah. Thanks for that. Repurposing them, giving them a new role, playing to their strengths and unburdening them. Anything else you want to add there, Jim, about that particular thing or point? And I like you say it's fast. It works really fast and it's evidence-based now. So say what you wanted to say, sorry.
Just a personal experience. Probably 15 years ago, spontaneously, I didn't know anything about voice dialogue or parts or any of that, but I was in a state of pretty deep presence when my inner critic popped up and said, oh, this is all bullshit. And for some reason, I just became curious and listened. And I noticed all the brutal things that this voice was saying, but I just, for unknown reasons, I just listened and asked, you know, do you have anything else to say? What more? And it was like blowing up a balloon and letting it go in the room, and it just went, you know, and it just all over the place. But eventually it just kind of ran out of energy and things to say. And that inner critic has never had this kind of power over me that it had before. So so when I ran into IFS, I went, oh, I think this is going to be really, really helpful.
That's lovely. And just that thing, I mean, Russ Hudson speaks about it as well. We bring presence to our suffering. We bring presence to our parts. We bring presence to their roles and bring that. I mean, presence always has a quality of acknowledgement and curiosity in itself. So I love that you used that word as well. And yeah, curiosity, like, yeah, I find that very helpful in the moment as well, when the waves of inner critic shame arises. Okay. No, listening. Thank you. Alistair?
Thanks, Ingrid. For the exercise, I picked the sarcastic joking part as the part I wanted to explore. But that was an easy thing to explore. And then there's that part where on the chart, you could have chosen the narcissistic part. And I was interested in exploring that maybe in my own time. And I just wanted to understand what does that really mean? What's a narcissist? Because we tend to use that term loosely.
Yeah.
And it's important to me because I was in a conversation with a coach in another circle. And then it's not in a conversation, it's actually just an argument. And then she said, you lack self-awareness. And then in my head, I was like, I'm in the business of self-awareness. But obviously now I'm reflecting on what happened and I'm just thinking, you know, even being a coach, there's part of my ego that's going like, I've got solutions for you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So what does that mean, being a narcissist, and how do I kind of like look into that?
Yeah.
Just checking myself, you know?
Thanks for bringing that. That's actually like such a brave thing to put forward and very vulnerable. And I'm sure you felt quite shamed in that moment in a coaching circle for somebody to say something like that to you when that's the business of what you're trying to do. So yeah, I'm sorry that you were spoken to in that way. But in the Enneagram world, they speak about primary narcissism, especially in the diamond approach and Almas. And in the Enneagram, narcissism is about self-disconnection. So they say at the heart of every ego strategy is some form of self-disconnection and ego idealization. So in the case of sevens, the narcissism is self-symbolization. So we think of ourselves in a way that is not real. It's not here and now, because the here and now is full of potential torment and pain. So we rather go into an abstract idea of ourselves. So that's self-symbolization, is the anti-self action of seven, is the true me here in the here and now, in my body with you, is too painful to experience. So I'm just going to get out of here and think of something or ideate or whatever the hell it is. So that's where the split comes in the seven. With Enneagram 3, say, which has a different form of self-disconnection, the ego ideal is the image. Like I'm identified with the image that I think the world needs to see. So I'm just going to be that. And so the anti-self action is self-imaging, is that you dispose of your true self and you put the self-image in its place. So that's my understanding of narcissism in the Enneagram world, is that we replace our true self with an ego ideal, and that's our Enneagram persona. In the more field of psychopathology, narcissism is a different thing. It's much deeper. It's a personality disorder, and that's a whole area of psychopathology that you can do research on. It's, you know, and I agree with you, the word narcissism is used in popular culture very freely for anybody that's kind of selfish, mean, exploitative, unfaithful, abusive. And it's kind of reduces our understanding of what the essence of narcissism is. It's like falling in love with an idea of yourself rather than inhabiting your own experience for real, which includes pain, just simple, straight up pain of being human. And we're going to be in a narcissistic identity until we can feel our full experience. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. That's amazing. Very, very amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair.
So I think it's interesting that, you know, in the original story of Narcissus, he looks at his image in the water. And so it's a falling in love with an image, not of oneself, but of an image.
Yeah.
Some reflection.
Yeah. And that the difference between the image and the real like in Sufism, they talk about you're only real when you're present to your own heart, because the heart is the spiritual organ of knowing. And if we in love with an image that we want to be, we're not attuned to our inner life. So we're not becoming real. We're not growing up. That's why sevens are called the pueritanus, the eternal youth, is we aren't growing old. We aren't growing up because we aren't actually living in ourselves. We're living in an ego ideal, a fantasy of ourselves. And to have one's experience is a very different locus of being and awareness. There's feeling, and there's, the kind of danger of connecting with somebody, free range, I call it. Like if you and I are sitting together and we're sharing heart to heart, then I'm very vulnerable, and I don't like that one bit. Yeah. So that sarcastic joking part is a thing. Yeah, I would have also chosen that one as 7 for sure. And so, yeah, thanks for that, Alistair. I think it's a very important question with the way we throw the word narcissistic around. We've all got a primary narcissism as an idea of ourselves. So, yeah. Anyone else want to say anything or ask a question? I think we end in about 8 minutes.
I can offer up a couple of different resources that have been helpful and interesting to me, of course, Ingrid.
Of course, put them in the chat. Oh, you mean?
And I did already put them in the chat.
Thank you so much.
So one of them is voice dialogue, and somebody else mentioned voice dialogue. And I did do a short course on voice dialogue with a coach that trains coaches in it last year. I think I put it directly to you, so I can't, I'm forgetting his name right now in a second, but he's very gentle, very loving, very, very, very good. And I highly recommend his work. And then the other work is Cynthia Lloyd-Darst, her Inside Team work and her book on Inside Team. And I really kind of love how she talks about captain and crew, and how do you actually bring, right, like recognize all these parts of you as playing a key role.
Yeah.
And when do you actually need, your inner critic to step up, or, who's at bat right now? Like, who do you want to be at bat right now for this moment in this conversation? So it's kind of like, how do we create a more healthy, relationship with these parts? And, by revealing the system to itself.
Yes.
Appreciating all these parts as playing key roles that actually do serve us. And I think it goes really well with the movie Inside Out, which is so much fun to watch as well, if you haven't ever watched it.
I watched it. Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing is, these metaphors of vehicle are often metaphors for the self. You often find people having a dream about a car, or are you going, Renata? Oh, you're waving to someone who's going. You
waving at Jim, who was waving.
Yes, see you again soon. So yeah, Melissa, I was just saying about this metaphor of a vehicle. People have dreams of a car, and they in the passenger seat, and some maniac is driving, and that's when the dream is telling you that a part has basically hijacked the show, and there's danger in that. And this idea of captain and crew, the vehicle of the self and the parts of the self that have these resources and can play a role and are needed, and who needs to be where, I think is a very wonderful metaphor. I was thinking of a friend of mine the other day, told me that she had a dream that she had this huge houseboat, and she'd invited all these wonderful activists from all kinds of diverse backgrounds, and they're all on this big houseboat going down the river with all this meaning and connection and purpose and sense of community. And I really loved that one. Like a houseboat is a pretty cool one.
Yeah, very nice.
Thank you for that. So you
Thank
put
you.
these resources in the chat. I see the messages that you put there are to everyone, not just to me. So it should be cool.
Yeah, some of them are. So
Thank you. That's lovely. And Yossi, you want to say anything? Anyone else? Manya, there are two of you. What a pleasure.
Yeah. You know, I'm still at this restaurant.
Okay. So we're going to mute you. It's too noisy for us to
Okay,
hear.
because I've got some beautiful resource. You know what? I'll type it up.
Yeah, thanks. The racket in the background. Yossi, you want to say anything? I haven't seen you for a while.
Actually, I wanna share with you something regarding the dynamics between the types or the energies of the types on the law of 7 and those on the triangle, you know. For a 7 or any of these types, it's really challenging to observe this whole parts because the dynamic of the energy itself is very fast. Can you hear me?
Now we can't hear you. Your sound's gone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just observed that being on this, you know, roller coaster of these types, especially, is really a challenging part for the types, the 6 types on this pattern. Maybe for the 3 and 6 and 9, it's a little bit easier maybe to be the observer. So I would like to, if you can share your thoughts about this.
Yeah, I really don't think that any type structure is easier than any other or more workable, or because our defense mechanisms are so unconscious. And if you spend time with the 3, 6, 9, when they speak about their inner life, they speak about how completely out of touch they are with themselves, because they're so busy blending with others and merging and being what other people want them to be and seeking safety and connection. So to actually find the wholeness that can relate to the part that wants to blend or wants to merge is a huge act, you know, a huge achievement to actually see, oh, this is the me, and that part of me that gets anxious in a social setting and wants to merge and connect. What is that part trying to do to protect this? So that split is just as difficult for attachment types, or, you know, every type has its own deep core thing to be able to differentiate internally and to identify the parts and to form a relationship with them. Like people complain about different clients, you know, like I'm supervising someone, and she says, I'm getting nowhere with this client. They don't do the homework. No. Guess what type she is? Yeah. So we kind of, it's
I can relate to what you're saying, but that I imagine that, like, you know, like someone who is riding a train which is a little bit slower, so maybe the long ride makes him or her lose the sense of herself or of himself, and this is typical to the triangle types. But if you are riding a roller coaster with this speed, you actually you see all this image or all these parts very quickly that you can not easily identify with any.
No, I really can't say that any type has it easier. When I speak with 9s about their way of zoning out and how difficult it is for them to stay here in a relational dynamic, engaged, I think it's just as difficult for a slow type to see their parts as a fast type. You know, I mean, if we've got triads on fast and slow, I've really found that, like, I used to think that 2s were the most difficult people to coach because they refuse to see, you know, because of pride. They're blind with pride. So I had a lot to say about them until I grew out of that and discovered, you know, the heart wound, the severed heart. What is the 2 ego strategy protecting them from? And then I got lots of 2 clients who had really viciously narcissistic mothers, and some sense of the other parent being someone that they idealized and longed for connection with, but was slightly distant, or, you know, an idealized relationship. So that I can't overgeneralize, but what I'm saying is people came into my world where I started to appreciate the need for pride. And it's a compensation for such a sense of extreme unlovability that it's actually painful to appreciate the wound behind the pride. And when we start to do that with every type, like, we don't try and bash through people's defenses. We try and appreciate that part's role in handling something pretty much unbearable when you're a little kid, you know, feeling unlovable, feeling invisible, feeling like your needs don't matter, feeling unacceptable, feeling whatever it is, you know, misattunement, emotional isolation, that your parents can't be relied on. So if you go to those heart wounds and you start understanding them experientially, then you see that all the type strategies are equally defensive and equally unconscious and equally tricky to develop a relationship with, you know, because they're so unconscious. And our minds reinforce them all the time. So the conscious mind isn't kind of the entry point to working with the pain that's in the body, really. But anyway, I'm gonna go on a whole, I can see I'm going on a trip now. Thank you for that, though. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you here. Thanks for coming. Yeah, Jane, I
The pleasure
see
is mine. Thank you.
deep thoughtfulness in the corner there of my screen up there.
Hi, Ingrid. Thank you. It's been great. And maybe to slightly change tack, you know, as an Enneagram 5, my so-called line of disintegration is to 7. And so I always find it fascinating to listen to 7s. And the more I listen, the more I recognize how 7 is definitely a part of my life when I'm ultra stressed and my 5 isn't working for me anymore. But how inspiring it is to hear 7s speak about the gifts of their type and how I can start learning to tap into that as well, and that I don't only have to go to 7 when I'm feeling stressed. I can choose to look for those the higher virtues of the 7, which is so accessible to me. So just, you know, as a 5, I think I listen in a very different way to what 7s are saying. So I just wanted to thank all of you. It's really it's great to hear.
Thanks, Jan. And that thing that you're talking about, you know, I think Renata did a session on the missing piece down our so-called line of disintegration. I mean, I so share your sense of, like, what's at 1 for me, I hold in deep reverence, you know, and there's that gift down that line. So yeah, that when we can tap into the virtues of that type that most of those people aren't in touch with, you know, the average 7 is not giving you a taste of the virtues of that archetype. So yeah, thanks for that. You're kind of picking out some of the cool shit.
Good. Well, thank you. It's always cool being here.
Good. Thanks, Jane. Lovely that you're here. So I think we're gonna close down the show. Look at the South Africans in the dark. It was wonderful to have you here. And what are we doing next time, Renata?
So firstly, thanks, Ing, for
Pleasure.
your time and sharing and generosity today, as always. Next time, I've sent an email to confirm, but what we have lined up is Linda Morse-Brown, sharing her insights and learnings from the year-long Shift Network Enneagram program with Russ and Jessica, which I believe from many people was quite profound. And so I look forward to her sharing some of the practices and learnings from that year-long program.
And Lynn, just by herself, if she hadn't been on anything ever, she's an incredible person, and she's a spiritual director. She studied with Richard Raw. She's got a very, very deep understanding of contemplative, like Christian mysticism, and she's someone I consider a big teacher. She's taught me some
And Melissa, you'll know her from San Francisco. That's where we all met. Yeah, if you remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally remember. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there's stuff that she taught me on the 8 course that I ran that I've never stopped thinking about and sharing with people as a very core part of my coaching practice I got from her. So yeah, that will be amazing.
Cool.
And we will see each other again then, if not sooner. Some of you I'm seeing tomorrow. Yay! So stay well, people, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Lots of love.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Renata.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renata. Thank you, Ingrid. Bye. Bye. Lots of love.
Bye.
Ing?
Whoops. Yeah.
Stay a second.